Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smart Kids podcast show. The last podcast show, I took you to China, and there we was talking to a lady called Dana, and we was talking about her book. And I said, kids, in that podcast show that I'm going to be talking in the next show to Simon Elson, and I am. He's a young author. He comes from Chorley Woods down in the United Kingdom near London. And he's written a book called Hades Forest, and he's chosen the genre dystopian. Why he's done that, well, we're going to find out very shortly. But this is his first book, and he's a very young guy, and this is his ambition to become a writer and to be on the world stage and to have lots of books published and be out there. That's his dream, that's his passion. And when I look at the blurb about him, I can see that he has, he's told me about his passion for football. He's told me about his passion for his English literature. He loves his football. So he is a very young guy, ladies and gentlemen, who is stepping out onto the world stage for the first time. So I'm going to bring him in to the show. Simon, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be here.
Simon, I said that you chose the genre dystopian. Why?
Dystopia has always been my favourite genre to read, and I'm a strong believer that if you enjoy doing something, then the work you produce is going to be better as a result. And I've always been fascinated by dystopia, even when I was a kid. And my favourite children's book, it wasn't a dystopia, but it was slightly darker. It was called A Series of Unfortunate Events, that very famous book series. And even that, as a children's book, was a bit darker, a bit more mysterious. And then as I grew up, I became fascinated by 1984 by George Orwell, and I read it over and over and over again. And it's been my favourite book now for longer than I can remember. And I think I've just always been attracted to the darker aspects of life. They're not as accessible. We don't see them. We more often hear about them and experience them ourselves. So I've always enjoyed kind of tapping into that and exploring it on my own. And so I love reading dystopia, therefore I enjoyed writing it just as much. And I think it's interesting to write about aspects of the human condition and human life that perhaps aren't as easily accessible day to day.
You mentioned in your book, you talk about mental health, and of course mental health, Simon, is a big issue these days. Did that have, is there a particular reason for, bringing mental health into your book?
Well, it is something I'm very passionate about, as I think a lot of people of my age growing up now are. So there was that aspect to it, but also I wanted to put a spin on the dystopian genre that perhaps isn't so commonplace. I've read a lot of dystopian books, and I've never read one that taps into what I would call 21st century topics, and by that I'm talking about particularly mental health and climate change. And those are two things that I do explore in my dystopian novel. And I think that just added a bit of an interesting element on it for me. I wanted to kind of, quote unquote, bring the dystopian genre into the 21st century. And that's what I tried to do. And by combining the dystopian genre with mental health and ideas surrounding that, I thought it created quite a nice blend, and I enjoyed writing about it.
In your blurb, you talk to me about you enjoy running, and I do a lot of cycling, a lot of exercise, and so to have a good, good atmosphere, a good climate atmosphere is important. And I think, looking at your book as well, you said climate change is important to you as well, and I think that's why you brought it into your book, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's a very important issue that I feel very passionately about. But also, like you say, I think also in my personal life, I take a lot of comfort in the natural world. Kind of like you say, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean when, if you've been writing for a few hours at a time, sometimes you can just feel very cooped up and you want to escape and get outside. And that's why I do kind of turn to the natural world in those kind of situations. I'm sure you do the exact same with your cycling.
I did. Yesterday, I got on the bike and I put my laptop on the back and I cycled down to the nearest canal, Simon. And I sat on the tables there, and there I had, I had a flask of coffee and a few bits and bobs, had my laptop, And it's amazing, you know, Simon, the number of people that stop by and ask me, what are you doing? And, you know, and I showed a couple of them, you know, my books on the website, and they were like, oh. So, yeah, you know, that, you know, climate change and those sorts of things, you know, is, you know, really important for me as well.
Yeah.
And regular exercise. And, you know, so when I go into the schools, you know, I do say that to the kids, you know, it's very, very important to get a balance in life. And I think when you write a book, Simon, I don't know if you agree with this or not, with me here or not, is you have to create a character that you know and draw on your own experience. So how do you create your character, your main character?
Well, I absolutely agree with you, actually. And therefore, with Hades Forest, it's not completely irrelevant that it is set in a forest, because behind the house where I live, there actually is a forest. And therefore, when I was writing the scenes where you're in the environment, it was helpful for me to actually leave the house, go in the forest, and kind of envision what I was describing, if that makes sense. So I completely agree with you. In terms of the character, I think I wanted to write someone who was a bit more accessible for me. And this was an interesting kind of challenge that I had, that I really enjoyed. With dystopian novels in particular, where there's a challenge or, you know, a big bad government, it's very rare that there's a main character that isn't a great big hero who's strong and brave and bold. And I actually went out of my way to do the opposite of that. And the reason I did that is because of what you just said there. The main character had to feel accessible to me. And I'm not a superhero. I'm not big and brave and bold and, you know, fighting enemies and all this stuff. I'm just a regular guy. And therefore it was important to me to write a main character who was also a regular guy. And that was what I tried to do with Hades Forest. So he's a bit more mellow. He's not that, you know, he's not extremely political or, you know, motivated in any aspect. He's pretty run of the mill. But I think that, again, added a different element of book. And it made it easier for me to write about, because I'm not a superhero. So it would be difficult for me to write about one.
Your main character is Perry Benson. Is there a bit of him in you?
Yes, absolutely. Just in that he's regular. He's pretty, you know, uninspirational. And the key part of the book are the events that happen around him almost, and the people he meets, rather than him himself. And that does create an interesting balance. But I think that that's more realistic of who we all are, and certainly who I am. You know, we don't do huge, drastic, life-changing things every day. We do just kind of go about our daily lives. And I think that's what Perry is. And therefore I kind of put myself in that, if that makes sense. He doesn't visually look like me. His appearance is nothing like mine, but he does act like me a lot more, I think.
Simon, I use, as I've said to lots of kids, when I go into the schools, or when I do talks, or when I'm doing my podcast here, when I create my characters, I use 14 points. It's the age of the character, the sex of the character. Has the character got brown hair? Has the character got brown eyes? Have they got, do they wear glasses? Where do they come from? And I use those 14 points so that I don't come a cropper when later on down the page, you know, I've got the character with red hair, and then next page has got brown hair, because the reader's going to pick that up. So do you use anything similar to, you know, for note down for your main character or any character?
Funnily enough, I do the exact same thing, for the reason that you just said there. I don't want to be caught out. For me, consistency throughout the novel is really important. I don't want things to be inaccurate or inconsistent. And so I do the exact same thing. For all of particularly the main characters, in my novel, there's 6 main characters. For every single one of them, I did about 20 points maybe of the really, you know, their backstory. So there was consistency in what they were talking about, and, you know, depth to their character. But then I also did it with a lot of the side characters too, because I think that they are just as important in forming that wider world. But I wonder whether you ever tried anything different, because I never tried anything different. This is my first book, and that was how I did it, with the kind of 14 points idea. But did you ever experiment with a different method of creating characters?
Slightly, but I've just learnt to use that formula, and it works for me. So when I do my books, when you look at my stories, I find, you know, so I've got one main character, and then because they are kids' stories, I don't wish to overcomplicate the characters. So I have one main character, and then I will have 2 to 3 what I call sub-characters. They are there to support the main character. Now, if you look at Harry Potter, well, the main character was Harry, wasn't it? And who were the sub-characters?
Well, Ron and Hermione.
Exactly, two sub-characters. So I use a triangle of characters because, yes, a lot of my books are kids' books. So I have one main character. I then have 2 to 3 sub-characters who support the main character. But then I have what is called the floating characters. These are characters that go in and out of the storyline just to move the story along. And I noticed that you've got 6 main characters in your book, as well as when you refer to them as side characters, I refer to them as floating characters. It's all
that's a really interesting term, actually. I think I kind of do a similar structure where there's a protagonist and then, you know, a couple of people very close to him, in my instance. I just think I have a higher quantity of floating characters, which is interesting. Maybe it's just because it's, you know, a different genre aimed at a slightly older age group. But yeah, exactly the same, like you say. You know, Perry ends up in a forest of 5 tribes, each with 6 people. So there's 30 people in this forest. And ultimately he encounters, you know, 75% of those 30 people at one point or another. So yeah, there was a lot more perhaps character plotting for me to do.
Do you love your character?
Which one? The main one?
No.
I don't feel particularly strongly about him either way. He's okay. He doesn't inspire me. I don't feel moved by him. I feel moved by the people around him. And if you were to ask me who is the favorite character in my book, it's absolutely not the main character, no. It's the main character's kind of friends that he leans on to kind of, you know, keep his emotions and spirits up. So no, I'd say there's about 3 or 4 characters that I prefer before Perry. I think that was important, actually, and I did that deliberately because it helped me to remain objective about what this person would really do. I didn't want to be emotionally swayed in how I wanted the main character's fate to end up. I wanted it to still be rational and logical and, you know, follow a chain of events. And I think perhaps not emotionally attaching myself to him helped me to do that.
See, for me, when I write the story, as my characters, they take over, they're live to me. They are buried in my head permanently. And I think a lot of authors, you know, have their characters, you know, all across, you know, their mind. It's every day. Their characters are there, you know, living, you know, with them all the time. You know, you're walking down the street, you're thinking about your character. You know, your character is talking to you.
But that must make it difficult for you to kind of separate your writing time from your leisure time.
Yes, but you get used to it.
Yeah.
And with the character I'm writing now, Charlie Sullivan, and, you know, the 3 other kids, you know, Dahlia, Rupak, and Ben, they are constantly in my head at the moment because I'm writing the story and re-editing it. So they are there all the time. They are real to me. They are, you know, they're just not figures on a page. They are real characters.
Yeah.
I want to move on, if you don't mind, Simon. I would like to take you on to how you go about your plot, your planning. I say a lot to, you know, to the kids and to people listening to my podcast. I split the plot into 2. One is I set the scene. And under that, you know, it's like what time of the year the book is written, what, you know, so what's the scenery going to be like, where in the world is the character, what time, you know, are we talking about, what, you know, time period are we talking about? And then the other side is the actual story itself. How do you go about the plot?
In a similar way, I think it's challenging because when you're creating a dystopian society, it's set in the future, and therefore the parameters of the society, the rules and laws that exist, aren't the same as what we are right now. So the first thing you have to do is establish the laws. What can you do? What can't you do? And why is that the case? Because then you've got to write a story that fits within it. And again, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the 14 points of characters. You can't have inherent contradictions throughout your story. So if there is a law in place in this society, it has to be abided to. You can't then throw it out the window because it would be more convenient for the plot. So certainly I start with the rules of the land, because I think that that underpins all of the action that happens. That's definitely my first step.
Was that fun for you doing that?
It was challenging because you want to be creative, but you don't want to be unrealistic. If the reader is going to enjoy your novel, they need to truly believe that what you're writing about could feasibly happen in the next few hundred years. And therefore, you can't go crazy about it. You have to kind of tread that line between creativity, but not being silly and not doing stuff where you go, that would never happen. That technology would never exist. You know, people would never act in that way. So it can be challenging. And I would say I actually spent the most amount of time planning my book on that aspect, for sure.
So, talking about planning, Simon, are you now? I've always, on the writing courses that I've attended, there are a couple of schools of thought here. There are some authors who will, before they even put pen to paper about the story, they have worked the plot out. They know exactly what's going into each chapter. They have got it planned and down to the minutest detail. That's one scale. On the other end of the scale, you've got people who, like me, we know where the start is, we know where the end is, but we just let the story flow in between those 2 points. Where do you sit on that scale? Are you the detailed planner, or do you just like, well, I'll open the laptop today and let's see where this is going?
I am a detailed planner. I think this is the first point so far where we've been talking about our process, where you and I have actually differed. But on this, I do actually differ from you. I am the detailed planner. Before I wrote the first word of my first chapter, I already had all 20 chapters of the book. That's how many chapters are in the book, 20. I had all 20 planned out step by step. What's going to happen? Who's going to do it? Why is it happening? Where's it going to go? Because also with Hades Forest, it's going to be a trilogy. This book is the first of 3. And therefore, I wasn't just plotting the story of this first book, I was plotting the story of the entire trilogy. So actually, before I started writing the first book of Hades Forest, I already knew what was going to be happening in book 2 and 3. And therefore, book 1 had to lend itself to that. So that requires a lot of planning. I personally wouldn't have felt comfortable doing it myself, just on the spot, I think it's much more important for me, if I know where I'm going. Perhaps that's, a bit of a control freak thing or something, I don't know. But yeah. I wonder kind of, that must be such a invigorating experience for you, kind of waking up and never know where it's going to take you. I bet that's a lot of fun to write.
That's why I do it, because it's more interesting, to me. I couldn't do the detailed planning because, well, I know about that. I'm bored with that. I like some thinking, oh, where's it going today? I know roughly where it's going, but it's like yesterday when I was sitting down doing my writing, I didn't know I was going to take it down this little bit of an alleyway here. And I enjoyed doing that. And I think if you don't enjoy your writing, or love your characters, or enjoy why you're doing the book, that comes across to the reader, and that has a huge effect on the reader. Would you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, and honestly, I don't think either of our methods is better than the other. It's just whatever is beneficial for you. For me, I've always viewed writing a book like a jigsaw puzzle. That's the analogy I always use, especially with Hades Forest, because it's long. It is 21 chapters. It is 70,000 words. So therefore, it is like a jigsaw puzzle in my mind. And therefore, I just don't feel comfortable starting without doing that. But I have so much kind of, I'm so in awe of people like you who can make it up on the spot, because I think that requires so much creativity. But maybe I just don't have it.
But the only problem with that is that you tend to you run away with the words, because I'm at the moment about 125,000 words, and I've got to get it down to 80,000.
Oh no.
But I always say, to any budding author, any kids that I talk to in the schools, is the most important thing is to get a good start and have a very strong finish. What's your view on that?
I absolutely agree. Again, it was interesting. When I was writing this book, I would say of all of the chapters, one of the ones that I put the most amount of effort into was the first chapter. Now, ironically, the first chapter is about a quarter of the length of all my other chapters. I deliberately did it. So chapter 1's about 1,000 words. All the others are about 4,000, give or take. And it therefore was interesting to me that I spent so much time on the first chapter, but I thought it was important. It was only 1,000 words, but the view I took was this. There's no point writing an incredible story if people don't stay that long to read it. You know, my chapter 15 could be the best thing of all time, but unless my chapter 1 is good, they're never going to get there. So, and therefore that was the approach I took. So I put a lot more of my emphasis on chapter 1, and I went for a hook. And this was a learning process for me, actually, because I'd never written a book before. And therefore, when I wrote my first version, my first draft, my chapter 1 was the same length as the others. It didn't have any action. It wasn't a big hook. And that was when I had to sit down and review myself for the reasons that you're saying. You know, you've got to hook the reader in. And that was what I tried to do. So I made it shorter. I made it more action packed. And I think chapter 1 kind of, you know, gets things going as I mean to go on.
You, Simon, when you first showed me your chapter, I thought, And then when I saw it for the second time, I actually sent it back. I said to you, didn't I? Wow, that's different. That's stronger. Yeah. That's been worked upon.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. When and that was why I changed it, because when I read the first version of my first chapter, I also responded a bit like that. I was a bit like, I mean, it's okay, but it doesn't arouse anything. It doesn't make you feel passionate in any way, and that was why I changed it for that reason.
Yeah, because a reader will only give you chapter 1, chapter 2 at the most, and they don't sort of like it, or it's not starting to get engaged a little bit with your characters, with your plot. It gets put on the shelf, and then they won't look at another book that you write. Because I always say to everybody, it's all about getting the reader to turn the pages. That's why, at the end of the chapter, you've got to leave a little bit of tease that, I must read the next chapter. And that's why, I say to all the kids when I go to school, why do you think the TV companies do this at the end? EastEnders or Emmerdale or that, they leave you in suspense at the end. It's because they want you to watch the next show. Yeah. And that's what you must do as an author at the end of each chapter, is leave a teaser. And a lot of people say to me, well, how do you write a book? Well, it's not just about throwing words on a page, is it?
Absolutely not.
There are techniques.
Yeah.
And you've got to put those little pointers in, and which people don't observe at the time. And then when it comes to the end, they think, oh, yes, yes, yeah. Yeah. So I always tend to use, because we are writing for different people here, Simon. I use a formula, a 10% introduction, 80% the storyline, and 10% the ending. Because I say to the kids is, your story's got to be thriller, as opposed to filler.
Very good.
It's got to be packed full of action, but you need to have, because a lot of them ask me, how do I go about doing the 500 word competition? So I say to them, 10, 80, 10. Do you use that, or have you got a slightly different version?
I've never thought about it like that, but I suppose I do now you mention it. For me, I completely agree that a book needs to be action-packed, and mine is. It's a plot-driven book. It's not a character-driven book that Hades Forest is. But with that being said, I think it's also important to get light and shade. And that's something that I spent a lot of time focusing on, Ultimately, character development is just as important as plot, because if the reader cares more about the characters, then therefore the plot has greater significance, because they care more about what happens to those characters. And that was the approach I took. So I would kind of alternate it. It wasn't a formula per se, but I was trying to get it so if I had a couple of chapters action-based, I'd always throw in one where there's still action, but it's slightly slower, less stakes, and more about character development, because I think that balance of light and shade was important for me. But yes, I guess now I think about it, it was about 10% introduction, 10% ending, and 80% in the middle.
But would you agree with me? It's got to be more thriller as opposed to waffle filler.
Absolutely. No one likes to read waffle, especially in a children's book. You need to keep their attention.
Absolutely. You know, in your job, as you know, in real life, you're in marketing. Who do you see as your market for your books? Who do you write for?
I write for myself, and therefore my market is people like me. When people ask me this question, my answer simply is males aged 18 to 25. That's the people I'm going for. Now, of course, it isn't exclusive to that group. It can go anywhere, but that's the way I aim it, because ultimately I write what I would enjoy to read. And therefore, if I would enjoy reading it, it makes sense to me that therefore other people of my demographic and gender would also like to read it too. So that's the approach I go for. It's males aged 18 to 25 for Hades Forest.
Now, you mentioned that this is a trilogy, so I'm taking that as there's some books in the pipeline.
There are, yeah. I've actually already started writing book 2. I'm about a quarter of the way through, believe it or not. Again, I think I enjoyed writing the first book more because I knew it was forming a bigger picture. And yes, there is a second book in the pipeline, and that will be the second book of 3 for Hades Forest.
So at the moment, you're self-published, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Any
That was
plans to be published?
What was that, sorry?
Any plans to be published?
No, put it simply, I'm afraid not. I really enjoy the kind of control that being self-published gives me. And, you know, I've only experienced it for 40 days. My book's only been out for 5 weeks-ish. So I'm still new to the game. You know, I've still got a lot to learn and maybe my perspective will change. But so far, my experience with self-publishing has been really positive. Like you say, I work for a marketing company, so I understand the mechanics of how to market a book. And I think that lends itself in my favor. But then also, I like that I have this kind of, you know, creative authority that if I want to change something in my book, I can do so and I don't have to run it past anyone else. I don't know whether you wish you had, you know, a bit more autonomy, or do you have complete autonomy when you write your books? I'm interested to know.
At the moment, I have complete autonomy because I'm self-published, but I would love to get a publishing deal and to get more of the stories and the books out there, because they've got the purchasing power, they've got the power to get it into the bookshops. And for me, it's about getting my stories out to the public and putting my mark on the public domain. And it's a bit like, you know, when I've looked at your background, and I was a little interested here, you said a comment to me, and I'm going to take it just a little sideways, you know, out of the books here. You said, yes, you got your A-level results in history, business studies, and English. And you put in the, you know, your blurb to me saying, oh, well, I've decided for the moment to not to go to Harvard or to Yale or to university at the moment. I'm doing, you know, chosen to go down to work at the moment to do copywriting, copy editing. Are you going to go to university? Would you change that?
That is a very good question. I think right now my answer is no, I'm not going to. It's something I always have to fall back on. That's the nice thing about having those results. They don't go away. They don't magically vanish. So if I want to, perhaps later in my life, I will. But my answer is no, I'm not going to go to university. I'm having a lot of fun right now in my life. I'm enjoying being in the working world, and that's not something I want to go back from. I'm enjoying having a bit of money, which is also something I definitely don't want to go back from. But I'm still experiencing that kind of university life because I have friends at university and I'm going to visit them. I think I'm getting the best of both worlds at the moment, and I do actually really enjoy my job, and therefore I don't think I could leave it and go to university.
There you go, everybody. Yes. At the moment, he's not going to go to university. Who knows? Simon, where can people, if they, you know, they've listened to the podcast, where can they go and get your book? Where they can get it from? Where can they buy it?
My book is available exclusively on Amazon. You can't buy it anywhere other than there, I'm afraid. But if you go on Amazon, it is called Hades Forest. Hades for the god of the underworld and the forest for the place with trees. And you can get it on Amazon, both in the UK and the US and in any country that Amazon ships to, basically. And you can also get it on your Kindle on there. You can also get it on audiobook on there. So if you like listening to Audible, Hades Forest is available on there as well.
That's fantastic. Simon, it's been fantastic talking to you. I've learned so much about you, not only just on the podcast here, but also on our previous chit chats and the blurb that you've sent me about yourself and your book. And it's been, you know, fascinating to learn about you and to see, such a young person of your age, going about something that they passionately believe in. And I give you all credit.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it's been a real pleasure to be on. And, thank you for having me and for letting me come on. I've really enjoyed it.
So they are kids, they are guys. This has been Simon Elson. His book is Hates Forest, and you can go and get it on Amazon. It's in the dystopia genre, if that's what you like. Next podcast, well, that's going to be a bit of a mystery podcast, so we'll have to go and wait and see what that's going to be all about. But for the time being, I would just like to say to Simon, thank you for coming on the show, and good luck with your book.
Thank you very much.